So you're planning an international trip. You're probably thinking about your passport, what to pack, maybe you've looked up a few health warnings. But what if I told you the biggest dangers aren't what you expect? In this explainer, we're going to go beyond the usual travel tips to uncover what the World Health Organization says are the most significant and honestly, the most overlooked risks you'll face when you're abroad. Seriously, just take a second to think about it. What's the number one thing you worry about? Is it some rare tropical disease? Getting sick from the food? Maybe something more dramatic. Go ahead and lock in your answer.
Because, well, the data shows that the most common threats are actually hiding in plain sight. They're part of the everyday things you do, both at home and away. The reality is, it's a lot more ordinary and way more preventable than you might imagine.
Now, look at this number, 1.3 million. It's just staggering. According to the World Health Organization, that's how many people are killed in road traffic crashes around the world every single year. This isn't just a local issue, it's a massive global problem, and it turns out to be the single biggest serious threat that travelers face.
So, that brings us to our first huge topic, road safety. I know we all navigate roads every day, but driving, or even just walking down the street in a place you don't know, well, that carries a completely different level of risk we really need to talk about.
So why is that? What makes it so much more dangerous? Well, the WHO points to a few key things. In a lot of countries, traffic laws just aren't enforced very well. The mix of traffic is also way more complex. You've got cars, sure, but also motorcycles, animal-drawn carts, and pedestrians all sharing the same space. Throw in roads that aren't well maintained and totally unfamiliar driving habits, and you've got a perfect storm for danger.
Just think about the difference. At home, things are pretty predictable, right? You know the rules, you know the flow, you understand all the unspoken cues between drivers. When you're abroad, all of that predictability can just vanish. Suddenly, you're the new person in a really complex and much less regulated system.
So, what's the big takeaway here? What's the solution? Well, the WHO's advice isn't complicated. It's not about buying special gear or taking some new medicine. It all comes down to your mindset. Whether you're behind the wheel or just crossing the street, being extremely attentive is your single most important safety tool. That's it.
Okay, so let's shift gears. We've talked about the journey, now let's talk about the destination. Once you've arrived safely, the risks change. Now we're looking at recreational activities. And this is where another really common danger pops up, often where we least expect it, in and around the water.
First, let's define something called impact injuries. This is when someone gets hurt by hitting a hard surface or an object in the water. You know, the classic and absolutely tragic example is diving into water that's way shallower than it looks, or where there are hidden rocks just below the surface. These kinds of accidents can cause incredibly severe head and spinal injuries, with consequences that can last a lifetime. When you look at serious incidents involving water, they pretty much fall into two main categories. First, you have drowning. And second, you have those impact injuries we just talked about, which very often happen because of diving accidents.
Now, it's so important to understand this. Drowning is not like what you see in the movies. There's usually no yelling or splashing. It's often completely silent and unbelievably fast. For children, the biggest factor is just a lack of adult supervision. They can get into serious trouble in just a few inches of water in a matter of seconds. For everyone else, things like powerful rip currents or even the suction from a pool drain could turn deadly in an instant.
Okay, so when it comes to adults, there is one specific factor that the WHO report highlights over and over again as a major contributor to both drownings and those serious impact injuries. Do you have any idea what it might be?
Alcohol. It's that simple. It messes with your judgment, it slows down your reaction time, and it gives you this false sense of confidence. Mixing alcohol with swimming or boating or really just being near the water, it dramatically increases the risk of making a fatal mistake. It's such a simple word, but it has profound implications for water safety.
So we've covered some pretty serious topics. The big question now is, how do we turn all this knowledge into action? Well, let's boil it all down into a simple mindful checklist you can take with you on your next adventure.
Okay, let's sum it all up. For road risks, the number one rule is to be extremely attentive. And that goes for whether you're a driver or a pedestrian. For water risks, it's all about constant supervision for kids and, for adults, avoiding alcohol. See? These simple actions are the things that directly counter the biggest threats.
And let's be really clear here, the whole point of this isn't to make you afraid to go out and see the world. Not at all. It's about replacing that fear with awareness and preparation.
It's about empowering you to make smarter, safer choices so you can actually focus on the adventure. By understanding the real risks, not just the ones we imagine in our heads, you're already a much more prepared traveler. So, with this new knowledge in your back pocket, how will you approach your next trip with a fresh sense of mindful safety?